Hey all, so back with another Spotlight with Context. This time we're taking a look at Werewolf by Night. This character is probably first and foremost a defender, but that aside, they are still a very fun attacker with some really interesting abilities, and so there's going to be quite a bit to talk about here. First off, I normally don't say too much about the base stats, but I will point out here this is competitive prestige. This is in the top 20. Right alongside Kindred. This is also a very large health pool, right? This is, if I did my checks correctly, I think this is the 12th largest health pool in the game, shortly behind Void. And so on defense, this is quite a bit to chew through, but also as an attacker with regen, this makes for a pretty tanky attacker. So keep that in mind when evaluating his other abilities. Moving on to the attributes, just kind of touching on them. I don't think I really need to say anything on survivability after that note. The damage is pretty darn good. It is situational. You have to ramp to it a little bit, but once you get rolling, it feels really, really solid. Ease of use, this one I actually a little bit disagree on, because as far as just like, the abilities turn on when you hit the opponent, that is true. But I actually think that there's a pretty significant level up in this character when you really master how to weave the Chilling Howl into the rest of the rotation. So I personally probably would have put this a half point or so lower. But that is not to say that Werewolf is like tricky or finicky. It's just that if you want to get the most out of this character, you are going to really have to figure out how to make the most of one of his core mechanics. Shouldn't really be surprising. Utility at 2 definitely makes sense. Like, there are some pieces in here, but this is basically a brawler, right? This big old wolf hits the opponent, they die, he can heal. That's kind of the core of this character. And then Defender Strength 4. This is not going to be a roadblock where you're like, oh my god, Kabam didn't give us any good options, which of course always usually means that we only gave you a few options and you don't have them ranked up. But that sassiness aside, there are plenty of options to this character, but they can still mess you up on defense, right? This is pretty similar, I would say, to kind of where Absorbing Man landed when he came out. Not quite there because the regen is not as aggressive, but at the same time, this is a character that's going to take a while to kill and can absolutely kill you if you're not careful. Moving on to strengths and weaknesses, that big one is Rupture. There is just a lot of Rupture damage in this character. That is where your entire offensive focus is going to be. The power gain is really solid. The regen is decent. It's kind of situational because it does scale with your opponent, and so don't expect like a King Groot, but it is a really nice element of being tanky. And then the unblockable and unstoppable are very good, right? These just give you openings. Unblockable is always strong. Unstoppable, remember, can also allow you to get credit for intercepts. If you block while unstoppable and then immediately hit the opponent, that counts as an intercept. So really powerful set of abilities there, all kind of tuned at taking your opponent out. And then weaknesses, this is a character with unstoppable, regen, and power gain, right? So what's going to be their weaknesses? How about things that turn off unstoppable, regen, and power gain? Not really much more to say there. Also, Rupture immunity would be a problem. That's the one thing I'll add. Moving on to the always active abilities, we have significantly reduced combat power rate. Makes sense for Mystic gaining this much power on top of Mystic Dispersion. Werewolf by Night is completely immune to heal block. That has some pretty potent questing implications. I know a lot of people really hate the passive heal blocks that are out there to stop the abuse of the willpower mastery. Well, guess what? This character can abuse them. So enjoy that. Incoming poisons suffer minus 90% duration. So this means, like, this isn't going to do anything against the permanent poison from Liquid Courage, but this is really solid against defenders like the Abominations who try and stack poisons. It also means that it is very, very difficult to use Archangel against this defender. I would not recommend it, that kind of thing. But minus 50% regen rate when fighting a silver champion. The thing to remember about this is that it is a regeneration rate reduction. So it is not just personal regens that this affects. This also hits willpower. This hits any regen from nodes, etc. Right? Additionally, this is going to stack with anything else that affects willpower. And so if you're dealing with a Werewolf by Night on defense, with a silver character that can apply a lot of debuffs, and you have the Despair Mastery, you can actually reverse Werewolf's healing just by applying debuffs, without anything else, just by virtue of using a silver character. So that can be a powerful thing to keep in mind. Medium 1 and Light 4 both inflict a Rupture debuff. These trigger through block. These do like a moderate amount of damage at first. Moving on to the Chilling Howl. Like I said, this is kind of the thing to really clock as an attacker. It is also one of the main threats as a defender. Because as a defender, Werewolf by Night has a 60% chance to go for this after dodging backwards, whenever they dodge backwards, or after using a heavier special attack, right? So the thing is, we're going to skip ahead to what this does. Howling grants a power gain passive. You get 8% of max power for each missing bar over 3 seconds. This means that when you're at low power, this power gain is significantly stronger. It can be up to 24% of your max power. When you're above 2 bars, it's only the 8%, significantly smaller. And then this is removed while struck. So this can mean that Werewolf on defense can back up, go into the Howl, gain a power gain. You have to hit him to remove the power gain. And then maybe he backs up again, howls again. You have to hit him to remove the power gain. You can see how this starts to become a bit of a problem if you don't have any direct answer to the power gain. It is only a 60% chance, and so at some point, he probably is going to throw a special, but the possibility of him not playing along and just continuing to gain power is one you really want to clock on the way into this particular fight. Now, that also means that if you have his power gain shut down with somebody like Void or Mr. Fantastic or Spider-Man 2099, well then, that gets that much easier, right? Because all of that power gain that could get away from you is now helping you out. But like I said, similar to Absorbing Man, you want an answer. So as an attacker, you can do this after dodging back or using a heavier special. Very similarly, it just happens automatically. Now, this says Werewolf by Night stands still for 1.7 seconds, and that's true. But you do not have to stand there for the full 1.7 seconds to howl. You just have to dash back and idle, right? Or just complete the heavier special attack. He will go into the howl animation, you will get your power gain, and then you can cancel out of the animation by doing something else, right? This is not a giant window of vulnerability where you're going to get hit. On attack, this is just something you need to remember to do from time to time, and it will work out for you, right? So play around your cooldown, but get your howls in. Very strong ability. So the main reason you're going to want to howl, other than the fact that gaining power is generally good, is that when you attempt to trigger a howl, so basically just when you start it, right? When you go into the animation, you get a lycanthropy charge. You also get a lycanthropy charge when crossing a bar of power, which howling helps you do, right? You get another charge when this happens if the opponent is suffering from a rupture. So this means that you want to start the fight by probably parrying, hitting them with your medium, putting a rupture on them, and then dashing back and howling. You're going to gain power. you're going to gain 2 lycanthropy charges. You're going to start working towards crossing that first bar of power, and that's going to give you 2 more. This is the start of your ramp. This is the kind of thing you want to be thinking about. Werewolf by Night also starts with 3 lycanthropy charges during the full moon. Cool little flavor bit, not going to come up that often. He's just better that one day every month. Moving on to the Curse of Lycanthropy, this is why you care about lycanthropy charges. When you get to 10, you get this curse for 10 seconds. Pretty short duration, except that it's paused during basic attacks, strikers, special attacks, and while the opponent is far away and has at least 2 unique buffs. So those last 2 conditions are together. The opponent doesn't just need to be far away to pause, they need to be far away and have 2 unique buffs at the same time. But the important part for you is usually going to be, as long as you're hitting the opponent, this stays paused. So be aggro, get more Curse of Lycanthropy uptime. Now that's important because while you're in Curse of Lycanthropy, you get extra Rupture debuff ability accuracy. We'll come back to that in a minute. You get 70% extra Rupture potency. That is very good, right? Because most of your damage once you get rolling is going to be Ruptures, so this is just 70% more damage. As a defender, he fights more aggressively, and he stops trying to Chilling How. So this part is really nice because it means that he's scary, he's coming at you, but it also means you have to worry less about the power gain. So there's a nice little trade-off there. Now, going back to the 70% flat Rupture debuff ability accuracy. This is important because the Ruptures on basics have a 100% chance to trigger, so why would he need extra, right? The thing is that this is going to help get around things like Glancing or Sam Wilson's Bulwark on block, right? I want to stop and talk about this for a minute because ability accuracy reduction can be extremely difficult to understand cleanly, but it is important to understand that in our game, non-flat ability accuracy reductions happen separately from flat ability accuracy reductions. Non-flat reductions, the usual percentages you see, are just going to reverse something's chance to trigger by 100%, or by a percentage, of the original chance. So if you have a 50% chance for something to trigger, and it is reduced by 50%, and you just see that, then that goes 50 to 25. It goes down by half of what it was. If you see 50% chance to trigger reduced by 50% flat, then that's 50 minus 50 and it goes down to 0. Another reason that this matters is it means that even if you had like a large reduction in non-flat ability accuracy, it's possible this 70% flat would still get around it, because whatever the result was after the other reduction, it just goes boom, plus 70. So be careful relying on anyone who reduces offensive ability accuracy while blocking, again, like Sam or Cersei, because you shouldn't expect Werewolf's Ruptures to not get through. Additionally, this also is very nice on attack because it means you don't have to worry about things like Hercules Infuriate, or again, not so much have to worry about Cersei's Glancing. You will be able to cut through those abilities to some extent. So, the next thing to think about is that you're going to get an unblockable and an unstoppable passive for 2.5 seconds at the end of heavy and special attacks while you're in this mode, but it has a cooldown of 10 seconds. So this is a very strong ability. We already talked about how unblockable and unstoppable are very good at getting you openings. This is also spooky on defense. If you do not have access to slow, you need to be very careful about punishing werewolf specials while they're in curse. Make sure this is on cooldown. Even if you do have slow, you need to be careful with the unblockable. Make sure you don't try to parry after that. Additionally, you're going to get a regen passive healing a percentage of missing health. It's a very small percentage, but it's constant, and that is every half second, right? Because it's missing health, this means that it's going to be stronger the closer to zero you are. Also against Cosmic Champions, when struck by a special attack while dashing forward, gain additional regen. So this means that Hercules trying to do a special intercepts, or somebody like Venompool, will trigger an extra regen. You'll get double the normal amount. Not a big deal, but cute little flavor bit. And then you lose all of your lycanthropy charges when Curse runs out. Makes sense. Pretty standard Super Saiyan mode. Moving on to Special Attack 1. Each hit inflicts a Rupture debuff. Again, pretty standard Ruptures. 30% chance to inflict through block, which means in Curse that 30 gets plus 70 added to it flat. And so in Curse of Lycanthropy, 100% chance to trigger these Ruptures through block. Remember, they'll also be 70% stronger. Don't recommend blocking this special in Curse. Additionally, the first 2 hits that make contact have a 200% chance to nullify 1 regen and 1 precision. 200% there, again, will get around effects like Circe's Glancing and still remove that regen where a lot of other mystics wouldn't be able to. If any buffs are nullified by these 2 hits, get a burst of physical damage. As the deep dive called out, if you are running max Mystic Dispersion, 2 triggers of MD, 2 buffs being nullified here, assuming they have 1 regen or 1 precision, right? If you only get one or the other, then that is 2 triggers of 12% of your total power, 24% total, and so like most of a bar, right? The special one can feel pretty much free against the right opponents. If you're facing somebody with regen and precision for some reason, which is a relatively rare combo, well then the special one can actually be net positive on power from all of those buffs that you're nullifying. Which also means you need to be very careful with this on defense, right? Because if you have dexed the first part of this special one, and then you block a subsequent hit, that's going to count as making contact, and that is going to nullify the precision that you got from dexing. It's going to do a big old chunk of damage to you, and it's going to mean Werewolf is that much closer to his next special, which will probably be unblockable and unstoppable, depending on how the fight's going for you. So keep an eye out for that. I definitely prefer pushing Werewolf to his special 2. Both evades are very learnable, but I find the special 1 significantly trickier. There are just a couple quick hits in it that can catch you off guard at first. Now the special 2, again, you're going to get each hit dealing a Rupture debuff. These are significantly stronger and much shorter, right? So a lot more damage packed into a small amount of time. Well, technically only a little bit more damage, but such a shorter amount of time. These are much bigger red numbers. If this is blocked, you get smaller Ruptures that only scale with base attack. So if you really cannot avoid this for some reason, it is better to block it, but it's still going to sting. And then the last 3 hits are going to deal an additional burst of damage, right? Now, that make contact is kind of interesting here because, like, if you were unstoppable for some reason and you blocked the first 3 hits and then dexed out of the rest, I'm pretty sure you don't actually get these bursts because it just assumes the whole special would land, so that wording may be a little bit misleading. Something I forgot to test during playtesting, but we'll see how that goes. Point being, on attack, this is kind of going to feel like your cash out, because you get this burst of damage for every buff on the opponent and every lycanthropy charge. And when you're fighting a defending werewolf, you really do not want to eat the special 2. I said earlier I prefer to bait the special 2 because I find it an easier dex, but at the same time, if it catches you, it's probably going to delete you. Moving on to the special 3, I did talk earlier about why or how you want an answer to Werewolf's power gain. This right here is going to tell you why eating the special 3 is a bad idea. Gain 10 lycanthropy charges, so instantly go into Curse of Lycanthropy. Inflict the stun debuff, so he's gonna come after you and hit you, even if you're in war and you're using an invulnerability boost. And if he's somehow already in Curse of Lycanthropy when this happens, which should be less likely, right? Because remember that he won't howl in Curse of Lycanthropy. Something else has to have pushed him to that, or this has to be a choice you're making as an attacker. Well, then you get a Rupture passive dealing a very large amount of damage over the longer duration. So that's really going to add up as well. Moving on to this signature ability, you're going to get extra potency for your personal regens for every buff on the opponent. Sorry, for every unique buff on the opponent. This is not a regen rate increase, and so this is separate from the earlier silver thing. This just makes the regen effect itself stronger. Now note that this also means if his regen rate is inverted, there will be larger red numbers from the inversion, right? If 50 health per tick of regen is inverted to 50, well then 100 per tick is going to be inverted to 100 damage per tick. And so if you're fighting a silver champion with Werewolf for whatever reason, and they have a bunch of buffs on them, and there's going to be something else hitting your regen rate, like Despair, you could end up kind of melting yourself. Additionally, this could be potentially something you use against him with the right silver champion on defense. Kind of a double-edged sword there. Very interesting in my opinion. And then you also can get access to unblockable and unstoppable passives that don't have a cooldown whenever you activate your Chilling Howl, depending on how many bars of power you have. So this is going to be spookier on defense. It's going to make it significantly harder to punish Werewolf, because above 2 bars of power, they're going to be unstoppable. It's going to be harder to just hit them to remove the power gain. It's also going to give you significantly more openings when you're attacking with Werewolf. So really strong signature ability, in my opinion. Doesn't look obvious at first, but ends up really helping the flow of the fight, or if you're fighting against him, hurting it. Moving on to the synergies, we have a small one here with the Legion of Monsters. This is governed by a tag, so if we add anybody else from the Legion of Monsters in the future, they will also get this effect. You get a Vicious passive for 30 seconds. It's going to make your damaging debuffs that much better. Nice for Elsa in particular, but definitely something that all of them could use. Punisher in particular is just going to get this after he endures a lethal blow. Definitely a step down, right? Because there are going to be fights that you don't trigger it at all, but can help you come back from something. With Moon Knight in particular, dashing forward from outside of striking distance gives you a Fury passive for every buff on the opponent, and then that stays paused while you hit them. Small synergy, but it is going to be easier to dash in from outside of striking distance when you're unblockable and unstoppable, and so that's going to allow you to probably capitalize on this and chain combos into special attacks, do more damage with all these Furies on you more often. With various beastie champions, get some extra physical resistance, always nice, helps you block against most characters, take a little bit less damage from ruptures, etc. And then with Man-Thing specifically, Chilling Howl puts a physical vulnerability debuff on the opponent. This is yet another debuff that can potentially help with Despair and Inequity. Werewolf does have quite a few other debuffs in his ruptures, so he may not necessarily need this, but just something to call out if you're having trouble getting them to stick. Additionally, because this goes up to a max stacks of 3, this can mean that when you go for your cash outs on your specials, you may be doing up to 15% more damage to the opponent. That's pretty significant. That can be a sixth of your overall damage output. That can be the difference between your special 2 killing an opponent and not. So, small synergies, but all pretty nice. And that's Werewolf. Like I said at the beginning, I think the key to using this character on attack is figuring out where to go for Chilling Howl without getting smacked in the face. I don't think that that is that high of an ask. It's just something that you are going to have to think about when you first pick them up. Once you get there, you start being able to go into Curse very quickly, and then you start being able to throw big chunky specials that delete your opponents very quickly. It's a satisfying playstyle. On defense, if you can bring somebody who is either Rupture immune, has slow, and or punishes the opponent's specials, right? Power Sting champions are very effective against Werewolf by Night. Recommend all of those. Or just use somebody who shuts down his power gain entirely. Void is a good one because he just ramps naturally. I've found Mr. Fantastic pretty effective as well. You can use the debuff Siphoner to try and reduce the ruptures and eventually turn them into willpower healing. It gets a little spooky once he goes into Curse of Lycanthropy, but hopefully by that point you're ramped, you can control him. Like I said, this is pretty similar to Absorbing Man on defense, where there are threats that must be answered, but there are a fair number of those threats in the game as it is. Or sorry, there are a fair number of those answers already in the game. So I wouldn't worry too much, just make sure that you understand how to fight him. So let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking of Werewolf by Night. Looking forward to him coming to the contest, and until next time, thanks so much for watching, and take care.